Good morning. Thank you for joining. Good afternoon, actually. Thank you for joining us for one of our last conversations for this Elevate Festival. I have as my guest today Ras Kofi da Farmer. You got to say it like that. Da Farmer. What's going on, Ras Kofi? How are you?
My sister Leatrice, how are you?
I'm doing well, thank you. So it's going to be you and I today. Originally, it was going to be me, and Jamila Norman, another farmer in the is in the West End area, and unfortunately, Jamila couldn't join us. So it's just going to be me and you. But
That's what's
we've
up.
done this. We've done this before, so we know what we're doing.
For sure. Good memories.
So, Ras Kofi, so let's talk about farming in the West End. For many years, you were at Truly Living Well,
Yes.
which is currently over in the West End area, the greater West End area. And so let's talk about just kind of farming in that community, and how that community, how the farming and how the farm has like really helped to, support education, support family, support, children, as well as, we are, some may say that that area is a food desert, just
Mm.
having healthy food in that area and how that impacts a community. So let's talk about that first, and then we're going to broaden it because you're doing so many things.
Sure. Well, Leatrice, one of the things I appreciate about you is that you appreciate history. Malcolm X said that of all our disciplines, history is most qualified to reward our research. So we put things in the context. So for me to answer that question, I have to really give more personal backdrop in terms of when I really got into farming. It was in the West End community that was living. My mother, Chaiko Kwayanam, I pray that she rests in peace. She transitioned 4 years ago. She really got us into farming at an early age when we were living in Guyana, South America. And her roots are from Georgia. Her mother, Dorothea Cook, lived by herself until the age of 94, until she fell and broke her hip and then had to be assisted another 2 years when she was, but she was a farmer. She grew, I remember in Orangeburg, South Carolina, her growing food all the time in her backyard. I mean, into her 90s, right? And so my mother inherited that green thumb, and she definitely gave that to us at a very early age, especially me. None of my siblings really have that passion like I do. So we moved to America. I'm giving you the very short version. We moved to America in political exile in the early 80s. And it was just about school at that point. I was in grade school, and then we moved to California for middle school and high school. And in the 80s, I was just thinking about girls and writing rhymes and on lunch break and all that kind of stuff, and getting into college. So, long story short, when I returned to Atlanta and became a father, my wife and I had our first child. It's like instinct kicked in. All these things that had been implanted in me so long ago, they just came to life right there on the corner of Oak and Dargan in the West End, right around the corner from my house,
Mm-hmm.
across the street from the basketball court, and Imam Jamil's community right there. We had a corner lot, and I remember we had a long debate slash family conversation because they wanted to keep the nice neat lawn and everything, and my whole thing was like we can't eat none of this grass. So we
Right.
came to a compromise because on the corner lot there's a walkway that led up to the front door, and so the lawn was divided into two sections. So we kept one side as a lawn and one side was a garden. And I have pictures of my daughter, my eldest daughter, who is now a mother herself, and who I was blessed to be able to do a garden for her in her yard for her and my grandson. Her eating tomatoes and okra and everything with me in the front yard. In her Pampers. You know what I mean? So for me to speak about farming in the West End, that's where I start. And when I came into that community, it was already a community of old school people. We had beautiful neighbors who were all from the country, and they were happy to see me bring chickens back into the hood and and grow food, and we were vegan at the time. They would they would eat the eggs and all this kind of stuff. So I'm answering in that way because I really want to emphasize that it's not something that is foreign to our people. It's part of our culture.
Mm-hmm.
And I would argue that most of us are no more than one, maybe two generations removed from the farm. I'm talking about whether we from Delaware or New York or Jersey or Wisconsin or Florida or Guyana, where I'm from, anywhere.
I
So
attest to that. I
yeah,
attest. Delaware, we're one generation.
real talk, and some very fertile land up there too. You
Mm-hmm.
know, so that was that. So years later, I was asked to come, and I first started at Truly Living Well as a garden educator. The organization had recently been awarded a grant from the USDA Beginning Farmers and Ranchers grant, and we were able to roll out this extensive program, a really powerful program where we were educating people on our urban agriculture. We had to develop the curriculum. We'd purchased the curriculum from our sister organization, Habesha, which I know you're very well aware of, and kind of tweaked it for our purposes. And so that was my start. And then later on, I think a year later, I came on as the farm manager. We weren't in the West End at the time, but of course we spent a lot of time in the West End because even prior to me being the farm manager, right there, Good Shepherd Church in the West End, right there on the right by the on the other side, kind of from where my children grew up. One of the sites that we use as our Truly Living Well site right there, So my big brother Eugene Cook, who was the manager at the time, spearheaded the building of some mounds over there, and you can still see the remnants of those mounds almost a decade later. That's a whole other conversation in terms of some of the sustainable practices. But we were there years later after we moved from our flagship site at Wheat Street, which was down there, which is a whole other deep historical connecting the dots story, kind of bringing back the vision of Reverend Borders. Uh, Wheat Street Garden was torn down and True Living Well took it over and it became Wheat Street Garden. Wheat Street Garden was a low income housing community for people. Interestingly enough, it was established for people who were misplaced by the Atlanta race riot back in the days, and it continued all that time. So when we moved from Wheat Street, which was our flagship site, 7 acres at the time that we left, based on gentrification, we found out later on that it was Georgia State University that purchased the property. But I remember being there one winter morning in the greenhouse. I just remember hearing something that sounded like a loud mosquito. I go outside, I'm wondering what's going on. It was a surveyor's drone. And I was like, yep, here we go.
Yeah.
Signs of the time, right? So
Right.
moving along, we moved into College Town. We got the keys to College Town Farm. My years are slipping now. But it was one winter day. I remember going in there and opening the gate for the first time. And that was the first time that anybody opened that gate in 20 years.
And that was
College
probably
Town,
about 6
College
years
Town,
ago.
sorry?
Was that about 6 years ago?
It
Or was it
would have
been longer?
something
Okay.
like
Yeah. I'm
don't
trying
make don't make me think too deep this morning.
to.
But the significance about that was that this was one of the housing projects that was actually torn down in preparation for the Atlanta Olympics. This was one of the first signs, one of the first moves of gentrification that I would argue strongly with anybody. This whole process was all these different homes, university homes. I think that was called yeah. Why am I missing? Not Perry Homes. It's Harris Homes.
Mm.
So where College Town is right now it used to be Harris Homes. And I remember when we first went up on the hill, because College Town is situated. College Town Farm at True Living Well is on 3 acres on the bottom, which is on a floodplain. Funny enough. So once in a while, I remember our first couple of years there, we got all the examples of what it means to be a floodplain. And then there's a hill that's going up towards the university, the Atlanta University Center. I remember one of the classes that I taught was a growing families boot. Living Well got a grant I think with Kellogg and another company to teach a class to offer a series of classes called Growing Family, which was for single mothers and their children. Taught soft skills, they taught financial literacy, and of course, the anchor of the class was urban ag. You know what I mean? But I remember being on that college town hill, and we dug out a terrace garden because we wanted to demonstrate in real terms how do you transform what you have. Work with what you have instead of trying to, create some pie in the sky or something. Part of the principles of what is now called permaculture, but is an old African work with what you got system. Somebody cutified it now, and that was called permaculture. It's got the whole industry around it. But the whole thing is about working with the landscape. So,
Yeah.
College Town Farm has a very steep hill, and as we were working that hill, we decided to let's create terrace garden because this was what you would do if you were in the middle of the woods. I remember the social backdrop in terms of giving the people the impetus to really get into this was Trump had just got elected or selected. Everyone you everybody was talking about, boy, we going back to Africa or something. So there was all this hysteria and this anxiety, right? So
Right.
my thing was like, okay, well, let's use this as some motivation to get what we need to get to anyway, which is feeding ourselves, self-reliance, right? So if you're in the middle of the woods, you have to just go into the woods because you got a crazy man in the White House and you feel safer in the woods or whatever. What would we be doing in the woods in a landscape like this? The assignment was literally to, first of all, block out the reality that there's a corner store and there's a hydrant down there. We let's imagine that we are out here isolated on this island and there's no modern amenities around. What would we do? So we dug out this terrace and we built a rainwater catchment system that was freestanding and wasn't based on any structure or anything, all that kind of stuff. How can we be self-sufficient? But my point was that, or is that, in that process, we recovered about 5 huge trash bags of artifacts from the old Harris home. I'm talking about Pampers and shoes and all stuff on this hillside. Later on, I remember a Civil War historian came around with his little lead finding thing, and he was looking for artifacts. So it's a very storied area. It's a very historical area that Wells College Town Farm is on. So that's the long and short of it. Farming in the West End is really a story about farming in America, African people especially farming in America. And I say that for many reasons because one of the things that's going on, as you well know, is the land grab, whether we call it gentrification. Moving back to when me and my children were living in that house, I remember the first time one of those homes, which were mostly appraised for like $60,000 or so, owned by elder black people. I remember right up the street, they gutted it. LisaandJeff.com from Remax. I remember them. And that house, that was the same type of house that we lived in, and most of our neighbors, was sold for like $300,000. I remember waking up one morning and seeing a whole bunch of white folk in the West End Park playing lacrosse on a Sunday morning. And these were signs of times, right? So in the midst of all this, we have people who are attempting to just focus on their basic life. And agriculture, I would argue, is one of our first goals. It is the first, and feeding ourselves. It's so fundamental to not just our physical well-doing or well-being, but our emotional well-being. The ability to do for self is so connected to life, like real, you know what I mean? So coming in the West End is all of that, because we in the midst of people trying to snatch our feet from under us, so to speak, the land from under us. And there's so many things, lessons, and discussions and down that road. And then also we're in the midst of a modern environment that is very close to downtown Atlanta, very close to the highways coming right through there and all that. So there's a little bit of toxicity that comes, environmental toxicity that comes with the picture that we have to mitigate, you know what I mean? There's There's the classism and the whole huge uh huge, I don't even know what the word is, but you know, I'm at a loss for words right now, but the difference in terms of the two Americas that our poet talked about years ago, you know, and all of this in the midst of people just survive, people attempting to be self-determining. So yeah, I hope that answers your question.
It answered all of my questions. The interview's over. We're done now. So, Ras Kofi, so talk, so you, because I was going to ask you about how you started and like what your journey was, because you know, you and I have been talking about farming and gardening for years. Like I'm still, I know you're still waiting to come over here and build my box, you know, for me. But let's talk about the impact that these farms, so truly living well, you know, all the farms that are patchwork. I mean, like all the farms that are in the West End, because those are probably some of the larger ones that we know, but there's also smaller ones that people are, you know, running and, you know, operating. But then also when we look around, you know, in East Point where you are now and like all these different places, what is the impact that these farms have on the communities that they're in?
Wow, it's profound. The first impact is example. Is example, you know. As we know, pedagogy 101 is to lead by example. And there's something very special about the process of agriculture, the whole reality of this ecosystem. It transforms people's mentalities just by seeing green space. You know, Atlanta is the greenest city in Atlanta and in the country, I think, by virtue of open space. You know what I mean? But all over, we see the trends now. We see the science behind it now. It's being refurbished. We're seeing it or regurgitated because it's really from all the way up your way. One of the first, I would say, one of the foundation of the modern green movement would have been the Move organization from Philadelphia. You know, Mumia Abu Jamal was a part of that. You know,
Mm-hmm.
back in the days. You know, before it was popular, before it was sexy. You know, but this was all based on a reality that being communing with nature and being in the green spaces has incredible psychological upliftment or brings incredible psychological and mental and spiritual upliftment to our reality, to our world.
And
So
there's
that's
something
first.
also about watching something grow, you
I
know,
mean,
that you have planted and that is manifesting and that
there's
can
nothing,
nourish you.
there's nothing like it. That's why as I told you when I became a father, instinct kicked in. You know, my whole thing, you know, going through just as a young man and playing with all these different religion and spiritual groups and everything. It's like, you know, a lot of times you ask something, why is that? And it's just like, well, that's just how it is. And when I became a father, I couldn't look at my children in the eye and tell them, well, that's just how it is. You know, now I can because I have a deeper understanding.
Right.
You know, but at the time, no, they need answers, right? And so that was pushing me too. So first and foremost, the impact is psychological. I would add, it's mental, it's spiritual. The impact in terms of the health is something that goes right along with that. And I would say, to be honest, that we're still grappling with how to make that impact more powerful because it goes into, it's kind of like a lot of the HBCUs in across this whole Turtle Island are located. When you look at them, they're right next to the hood. And the question is always, well, how are we elevating the lifestyle of the people right in the immediate community? Where I am right now at Shamba Farms in East Point, we've been able to do that. I can see measurable results. You know, at Truly Living Well in West End, we can see measurable results when we see people coming in with all form of illnesses, and they just want to ask. Even sometimes, if they don't want to ask, they just want to come and help themselves to some plums. You know, I remember when we moved to College Town, we brought all the fruit trees with us, and when the plums finally caught. I think it took them about 2 seasons, like a full 2 full years,
Hmm.
and they started blooming again. Oh my goodness, the impact was powerful because all of a sudden the DNA and all these people who for the last 20, 30 years of their life only been exposed to Takis and hot fries, that DNA that they came from of being country boys and girls and seeing these fresh plums.
Kicked in.
Oh my goodness. They was helping themselves to it. We didn't get to sell none of it, but it's all good because,
Yeah.
that's something that connected, you
Hmm.
know, fresh fruit. Because in the bodegas, in the corner store, they ain't got no fresh fruit, maybe a couple bananas,
Hmm.
right? So
Yeah.
the whole thing of the food desert is a whole conversation in itself. Karen Washington, along with other people, have done some great research and really um, instigated some pushback in terms of these terms kind of just get thrown out there and are used for generation of grant funds and everything, but are not really accurate. The food desert signifies, or food desert suggests that it's a natural process. Desertification is a natural process to a certain extent,
Right.
right? It's also a very man-made process too because of the
Hmm.
foolish do.
Yeah.
However, to call it a food desert is not accurate because we see that the West End and other areas that have a lack of access to local food, especially comparatively speaking to other areas that are more well-to-do economically, it's not just because these people they just happen to be in a place there ain't no stores around. It's deliberate. It's part of a social policy. So
Hmm.
we've decided to call it food redlining instead, or food apartheid, and all this kind of stuff, right? Just as an aside, but back to your question in terms of the impact, I have a million stories of how people would come up and just first of all thank us for just what we do. Thank us for what we do. I have stories of people who still to this day haven't come onto the farm, but would come. One of them is a brother who was the neighborhood don of that community. A brother named Lonnie Hood. Rest in peace. He literally protected the farm. You know, he was into the street life and he ran the neighborhood. you know, and a lot of his constituents wouldn't come on the farm, but they respected what we were doing, so he protected and make sure that there was no vandalism. That's a profound impact.
Yeah.
It wasn't, what I mean, no money exchange and nothing, just for the fact that we're doing something that is elevating and we're able to
Right.
employ a few people.
Hmm.
And I mean, I could go on and on and on in terms of the impact. It's real, and it leaves a lot to be done, accomplished as well. Because,
And that was
and
very.
I say that because of the fact that I'm not from the mentality, the welfare mentality. I'm not from the mentality of, we'll take whatever, from Caesar because it's all due to us and reparations are a must. However, we don't wait on Caesar to do for us. Our teacher is more like from our Saint George Washington Carver, who was trading. He was traded for a broken mule as an enslaved young man. That's how sickly he was, and ended up being written to by Booker T. Washington years later, and he said, fame and fortune I cannot offer you.
Right.
You already have those, and I can't offer you wealth. But what I'm offering you is hard work and the opportunity to help to build a broken people. And he accepted this invitation. That's our heritage.
Hmm.
Those are our gurus, in terms of the urban agriculture movement. I know I can speak for myself. I know I can speak for people like Jamila from Patchwork and our colleagues on that issue, or the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, who told us we got to get some of this good earth for ourselves. So my whole point is there's a lot more to be done, and I know that it's really us that's going to do it, period, because we're all we got and we're all we need. And this pandemic, which no man could have planned, is, I would argue, is clearly demonstrating to us, with all of the with all of the complications, with all the stuff that we still trying to work out. One thing that I think across the board, people feel more empowered to do for self. People feel more empowered just to be themselves, to take some, to be with self. I mean, and then also to, so look at how after all these months of relative lockdown and deeper insight being gained by just whatever it is that people do when they by themselves in the middle of the night. Now we have worldwide protests over something like the murder of George Floyd, which is not anything new, but like there was a profound domino effect. And I think my argument is that all of that was caused based on the fact that we were able to reflect. So if that can happen and it's forced, and we still, if we look around, we're still not out of the woods in terms of that environmental hazard called white terror, then there's so much more that can and will happen. And we have the motivation to do it now.
So I want to back up a little bit because I have one question though about people and how people can, what are tips and how people can get involved. But before we go there, I want to talk a little bit about the broader industry and the broader field. For years, Black farmers in this country have not gotten the support that they needed, the support that they should have been getting from our federal government at the same level that other farmers have. And I know that just recently, in recent years, they've finally won a class action lawsuit to get some of the support and resources that they needed. But can you just kind of give people just a brief history of some of the challenges that Black farmers have had in this country, and just trying to till the land and do the things that and to operate at the levels that would make them successful and at the same level of success that their white counterparts are having? I know that's a whole show, I know, but if we can just give a brief overview, because I really want people to understand the West End, what's happening in the West End in the context of a broader scope.
Well, I think Dr. Martin Luther King summarized it beautifully in one of those speeches that just surfaced within the last 5 or 6 years, where and people can find it on YouTube, if they want to do research, when he was talking about a land grant. But he's basically saying that at the very same time that the United States government was sending people out west and expanding the territory, they were creating land grant colleges. They undergirded the poor white farmers with land as well as technical resources and everything. They were telling Black people to pull themselves up by their own bootstraps. And that's what it's been all along. It's been resources given to people, to not just physical resources, not just money, but technical resources. These extension services, which are a resource that we all have available to us now, but they were started in those times, while our ancestors were still definitely considered officially 3/5 of a human being. So there's always been a very unbalanced scale as it relates to something, and farming is something so fundamental to life. Again, something so fundamental to life. Not we spoke about the psychological effect, and that never leaves, but also just the whole idea of being able to feed yourself. I mean, going back to World War II, what were erected all over the country when most of the soldiers were away? They erected victory gardens, right? Victory gardens for the wives who were left behind and other people to grow themselves some food. So we're talking about something that's fundamental to human life. But African people, Black people, have never been able to receive what we were due from the government. Not only were we not able to receive it, but it's been suppressed. And like as Dr. King continued in that speech, nowadays the same people are giving farmers millions of dollars not to farm and subsidizing their, saying. True. We have to go through all kind of drama to get into a vacant lot to just grow some food.
Yeah.
You know, that there are many people that I know, I've experienced this myself, with private entities as well as cities that just give you the whole runaround. And you're saying all I want to do is just use this land, and I want to put my own resources into it, not asking you for a dime. And all kind of drama, you know, all
Mm-hmm.
kind of. I mean, Jamila could speak for herself about her interest, her experiences with Patchwork. Number one, you know, when they were where is now Brown Middle School, and dealing with Atlanta public schools and all that. She made history. That was one of the first farms, urban farms, owned where the land was owned by black people, and these were two black women. You know, but it's been a fight all along.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do now, one of the things that is a silver lining is that black churches are still some of the biggest landowners in the black community.
Mm-hmm.
I mentioned Good Shepherd, Brother Eugene, and they were at Providence, which is on the edge of the West End, Reverend Durley's church. You know, there's been churches that have opened up their land, and you know, we still have a lot to work out. You know what I mean? Because it's a culture again that our culture of trust in each other, and our culture of respect, our culture of abundance, thinking abundantly instead of thinking with lack. You know,
Right.
as the old rhyme to say, the illusion of lack breaking our back.
Mm-hmm.
That is something that is taking generations to heal. You know,
Yeah.
but I mean that's the brief answer. But I really urge people to look up that speech by Dr. King because he really broke it down so clearly. And
Mm-hmm.
at the end, he says, "Now when we come into Washington, because this was right before they murdered him, and he was announcing the Poor People's Campaign."
Mm-hmm.
And when we come to Washington in this campaign, we coming to get our check. And we never got that check. We never got that check.
Right. So, thank you for just kind of, capsulizing that. And I do really encourage people to, to like really do that research, and see what the challenge of that Black farmers have had, over the years in just trying to farm. And then even the stories that have popped up most lately, with the sugar cane down in New Orleans, those fields, like the family that had that farm for, I mean, decades. And, because when they decide that they want to come for your farm, everyone is a part of the conspiracy. So from the banker to your
Uh,
local county officials, everyone is
guilty,
in cahoots in order
guilty.
to move that land from Black people. So yeah, so I want people to make sure that they do that kind of that research, because it's fascinating, and also we need to understand how to support farmers that are caught up and are doing these things. So regular folks like me, I'm not a farmer. I don't even know. I don't think my thumb is green. Actually, I can tell you it's not, because I've killed more things than a little bit. However, I have, I do want to farm, or I
Yeah.
want to have a garden. My sister actually started her garden, early in the pandemic, and she was like, you know what, finally, I have time on my hands. Let me do this. So she built her bed, and and I have benefited from all of the great tomatoes and everything coming out of that garden. And so I want to definitely do my own garden. So, how do you recommend people get started? What are the tools that they need to do that? It's the fall of the year. What should we be planting right now? So let's talk about those kind of things.
Absolutely. Well, first of all, starting with the season is the autumn. And what's happening is, again, our creator, known many names and many natures, is showing us that we've been created to a system of abundance. As the deciduous leaves fall from those trees, and those are leaves that have been gathering energy from the sun all year since the springtime. When they drop down, that's gold falling in your backyard
Mm-hmm.
or on your street. I'm that cat that go around 6 o'clock in the morning and pick up the leaves before the city come and get them. I remember one year driving through the West End, I could feel that it was going to happen too. I was making my runs, and I think it's like the day that they come is on a Tuesday, so I was doing it early Tuesday morning, and some brothers was out right there on Gordon Street, Gordon Place, and I made a couple of runs going back to the farm to drop off the leaves. And finally, this brother asked me, "Hey, what kind of hustle that is?" And I'm making gold, bro. And we struck up a conversation, you know. But those leaves actually contain almost precisely the formula of carbon and nitrogen which it takes to create compost.
Okay.
Compost is rich soil, which is going to help us to grow food. The most important, fundamentally, first thing is the most important factor in agriculture is the soil, right? It's very important. So, and it doesn't mean all soil for all plants are like the same, but just like the environment of a child, that the child grows up, that's the most important factor, right? How does this child, what is the environment that this child is being raised in? That's why it takes a village, right? So soil is most important.
Okay,
And
now question
in
for
the
you.
fall,
But I have a
sorry.
question. So if I haven't collected leaves and I want to get started in the fall, do I need to wait, or can I go get soil that's already enriched with what
Yeah,
I
you
need?
can get soil from Truly Living Well. Truly Living Well sells compost,
Oh,
very rich compost.
okay, fantastic.
Some of the best compost that I've ever seen. You know,
Okay.
we have compost here at Shamba, and there's other places. There's shameless plug to a group of young men that I think are doing excellent business down. They're not in the West End, but they're very close. Cumin Landscape. These are people who have planting soil that they sell, and it's at a very reasonable rate. So you can get soil, and
Okay,
then what
great.
you can do with a lot of that soil. Now, True Living Well soil is rich already. It's full of nutrients. The stuff that you'll get from most of the other places is not full of nutrients, but you can take that and you can inoculate it. So you can use that as like the placeholder. You can use that as the bulk to fill up your garden box, to fill up your pot on your patio. And then you can use things like alfalfa and other products that come from the soil, come from the earth, that are rich in vitamins and minerals, and kind of inoculate the soil.
Got it. Okay.
So I would say, regardless of if you're living, in an apartment and all you have is a patio, or you're living in a large backyard, or you don't even have any room except for in your windowsill, you can grow some food this fall. You can start right now.
Okay.
You can grow some.
Ready.
Say that again.
I said I'm ready. Okay, so
I thought
after I get my soil, what do I do next?
Well, before you get your soil, decide what you want to grow. And first, before that, let's backtrack a little bit. Do a scan of your environment to see how much sun you're getting. So again, if it's in the apartment, let me just start with the most so-called difficult places to grow. Let's just say you have not a lot of land space, you only have a small patio or a windowsill. How much light comes through that windowsill every day? Then do a little search, let your fingers do the walking, like they say, on low light plants, low light vegetables. There are several that do not require a lot of light and are very nutritious. You know, sprouts now are killing the game, you know. That's a huge industry in itself, just sprouts and microgreens.
Okay.
Well, good news, microgreens can be grown right in your window, right in your kitchen, right on your balcony.
Okay.
We're not even talking about in your backyard, because in your backyard now you can feed the whole neighborhood.
Okay.
And we can share that. You know, we offer classes that really help you to do that, as well as consultations where people can come. Really, we can sit down and start with your vision in mind. I can't stress that enough. This is an intimate relationship between us and our Mother Earth, right? And it's very important that we look at it from that perspective instead of some new science that we're trying to wrap our mind around. Okay?
Yep.
So this is important. This is as intimate to us as our mother's milk. So my whole point is saying that there's a connection there already. You know, in the old church, they say, you know, take one step and God takes 100 steps towards you. But I've seen that made manifest. I've seen that clearly manifest in the world of agriculture.
Right.
Just the
So
curiosity.
oh no, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I'm saying just the curiosity alone. That's all you need is the curiosity. Doors and doors and doors and doors are open. It'll keep on unfolding. For instance, just giving your viewers some homework in terms of research. There's a video out there called God's Pharmacy, and this is not religious. I'm not proselytizing. It's just named God's Pharmacy. But what it shows is the whole physical science, or I guess that's chemistry and biology, all up in there, about form follows function. So if you're somebody who's just interested in doing better, 'cause I'm saying again, let's start with what you want to grow, right? What you want to focus on, what you want to heal, what you want to address. And you say, man, I might have some joint pain or something, you know? Well, God's Pharmacy, the video will show you that you can see the foods that are good for certain parts of the body by looking at their shape. So if you look at a celery, it looks like a bone, and lo and behold, celery is good for bone structure.
Okay.
You look at a carrot, you slice the carrot, what does it look like? An eye. And carrot is eye food. You slice a tomato, and it looks like the chambers of the heart, and tomatoes are heart food. So my hope is start with what you know. We just start with that. Because it's intimate, and if you start with that and then you have some kind of oomph behind that, you have some kind of motivation behind that, it's not going to be something that you're going to easily let fall by the wayside.
Right.
Start that and start with manageable steps so that it can become something that's fun and not just a task.
Not a chore.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't like to talk about what what is going on, all the deleterious and just all the way evil things that Monsanto and all these other people are doing that are backed by the government. I don't talk about that a lot, not because they don't exist and I'm just trying to bury my head in the sand, but I don't want that to be the motivation why we do things. We're not reacting. We can be revolutionary instead. So I'd rather talk about the fact that it's in your DNA to be a farmer. And not only is it in your DNA, let's talk about DNA for a minute. Since GMO is a big topic, let's talk about the fact that I can make the imprint of what my family needs by soaking the seed that I'm getting ready to plant in my saliva. And I'm imprinting my DNA. So even though it's still going to be a tomato, it's still going to be a bean, it's still going to be a beet. It's going to be a beet with Leatrice's DNA in it, which is telling that beet, is telling Mama Earth what exactly Leatrice needs to bring balance to her ecosystem, to bring balance to her life. Because we're giving that chemical, just same thing with when people live in an area for more than a few years where they urinate in the yard, where you're seeing is all this food coming up that is a direct response to what you need, right? So you see places that have heavy alcoholism and everything, and you see in the streets around them, you see dandelion growing everywhere and clover growing everywhere. Why? Because that's a blood cleanser.
Wow.
Sophie,
you always are like educating on another level. I've never heard that. Never really thought about that. Well, why would I? Yeah. Interesting.
So again, just to keep it basic, if we want to grow food, this is the autumn. Let's start with what we want. Let's start with what we really would like to grow. Either what we really like to grow or what are some needs that we would like to address. Start with one. Don't overwhelm ourselves.
But can you grow tomatoes anytime? Can you grow greens anytime? Or is there certain times of the year that you're doing?
Tomatoes are usually more of a warm season crop. But we teach classes. It's easy. You can do YouTube. You can go to YouTube University and see how to create a hot house or a cold frame that can be an extender.
Okay.
So even if you go visit your local farmer now and get a couple of tomato plants that are maybe starting to dwindle, and you cut what we call suckers off of them, you can start a new plant and just put it somewhere where it can stay warm, or bring it inside. Take it outside and during the warmth of the day and bring it back inside.
Right. Okay.
Tomatoes not necessarily seasonal for the cool season. But what are definitely seasonal or highly nutritious are those sprouts. Alfalfa sprout, Brussels sprout, broccoli sprout, any green, you can grow them as sprouts, microgreens, and they're the most nutritious when they're small.
Okay.
And you keep on growing them. It doesn't take much at all, right? Broccoli and collards and kale and cabbage and carrots and beets and turnips and rutabagas and onions and garlic. All of those things are very appropriate for the fall, and we're not too late.
Okay.
And they go all the way through the springtime.
And then how about like ginger? When can we
Yeah,
grow ginger?
that's a great question. Ginger and turmeric are and very much high demand. And
Mm-hmm.
again, these are foods that can help us with a global pandemic going on. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they can practically help us in many ways. They both like it hot,
Okay.
so put it in the greenhouse. That's one thing. And they take a relatively long time, a few more months to grow. But again, it's very simple. It doesn't take really a huge, you know, amount of study or a degree in agriculture to grow those things.
Okay.
The root, they spring up, so you just gotta give them what they need in terms of the soil, texture, and pH in the soil, and the heat that they need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because it seems like we're also at a shortage of those things right now.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. So we can grow our own. We can grow our own elderberry.
Mm-hmm.
We can grow our own mint. We can grow our own parsley and cilantro, which is very good for removing heavy metals, and that's the time of year for it.
Mm-hmm.
Parsley high, a huge, like you talking about a 5 hour energy. That's a 10 hour energy. Instead of taking in a little bottle, and having some sugar high and crashing after that, that's
Right.
parsley right there, and you can eat it, and it'll glorify your whole system.
Mm-hmm.
So there are many foods, but I'm very excited about the cool weather because the other thing about those greens that I mentioned is that they are the gift that keep giving. I can literally clip a piece off of my lettuce plant, clip one leaf off of each plant. I have about 8 or 10 plants in a little box, and that'll keep on coming back.
Okay.
And so, it's abundant.
Mm-hmm.
They're abundant. Most of those food, cabbage is not going to, if you clip the head off after the head is done, that's not going to come back. But the broccoli leaves and the kale leaves and the lettuce leaves and the mustard leaves and the chard and all these things will keep on coming.
Okay.
So there's something that will replenish you throughout the season.
Okay. Well, we have a few minutes left. And so I just wanted to bring it back to the West End. So how can people connect with, areas in the West End? You're in East Point. What's the best way for people to connect with these places, with Truly Living Well, with Patchwork Farms, with all these farms and even the public gardens that are in the area?
Well, I would say two things. One way is just connect online because because of the COVID issues and everything. There's different kind of health safety precautions that are taken up at our farm, Shamba ATL. We have what's called Family Wellness Saturdays every Saturday, and since, as a matter of fact, we had our soft grand opening March the 7th, and the next week a global pandemic was declared, and we haven't been able to. There ain't been no break, ain't been no quarantine chill over here. And it's just been powerful seeing the people, the regular, everyday people, as you said, not people who are just, the Afrocentric and the so-called conscious community or the gardening community or people that are well-to-do, regular, everyday people coming for these immune boosters, these products that we share. So look up those farms is one thing. That's all I'm saying. They all have information on Instagram and Facebook and everything. And the other thing is just to show up. You ain't gonna get shot if you show up at any of them things, those farms, and they, maybe just politely tell you, "No, we don't have volunteer hours at this time," but just show up. Farmers love that. I'm
Right.
speaking from personal experience. Just show up. You want to go talk to Jamila? Come help her pull some weeds while you picking her brains, so to speak. Because the work never ever stops for us. So show up. Just literally just show up. Show up ready to roll your sleeves up, you know, prune a tomato, pull a weed, wash a piece of kale for market, whatever it is that the farmers need to do. And in doing that, you're not just connecting with some farmers. What you're really doing is taking yourself to school. You're enrolling yourself in school because repetition is the mother of knowledge. So
Mm-hmm.
literally, there's so many people that I can tell you they just show up every day and all they do is just push compost.
Mm-hmm.
But after a year, they can tell you everything about the farm and what's growing there and everything.
And I was going to actually ask you, are you still doing classes yourself?
Absolutely, absolutely.
So how can people connect with you for classes?
Well, our Instagram, social media is popping today. So our Instagram is Shamba, SHAMBA .ATL. And on the link in our bio in there, that will take you to the whole spread of all the different services we offer and everything. My website as well is onthefarm.com. That's ONDAFARM. D as in David, A as in FARM. Onthefarm.com. So either way, but we, encourage you to visit our social media because you'll get a clue, you'll get an example of, you'll get a reflection of people just like you who come out here. It's a safe space, 1.5 acres, enough space for people to do their thing and veg out in the sunshine or in the cooler weather that's taking place right now, and still be community.
Mm-hmm.
We like to say we don't social distance, we physical distance because that's very important to maintain our integrity and the integrity of our family with our health, but we're socially closer than ever.
Mm-hmm.
And that might sound like just a technicality, but words carry power.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, that's one way. I mean, there's two ways. Look up the farms on social media and also just showing up.
And as we close, we have just a few more minutes. Something that we did not talk about, which the land has always, historically, as well as in our contemporary space, provided us with, is liberation. And so we have not talked about the ownership of land and the farming of land in terms of Black liberation. So I certainly would like for you to speak to that because, you're one of the, when I think about people in Atlanta that are working in this space, that you're one of those people that have worked in this space in different cities. You were in Philadelphia, you've been in Guyana, you've been in all these different places, but you understand the necessity of farming and the necessity of ownership and liberation through the land. So can you speak to that?
Yeah. Henry Kissinger just once said that he who controls the land controls the people. He who controls the food, rather, controls the people. And I mean, that's all that needs to be said. So if we're talking about being free, even if we own the land we live on, which is a whole concept in itself that's kind of foreign to indigenous people. However, as a people that have been misplaced, displaced, and all that, I don't think it's unhealthy at all for us to get into the culture of owning some land, right? Even if that's just the first tier of understanding. So liberation and land go hand in hand. Malcolm X put it in another way, land is the basis of all liberation. Land is the basis of freedom. Why? Because even if we just want to do some yoga, or I just want to have some tea time with my homegirls or my homeboy, even if I just want to have some private space where I can strip myself butt naked and walk up and out the house and not feel like I'm in anybody's way and anything, but just to be, just as natural as I can be. I need my space for that. I need space for that. I need to be able to be stress free in my space where I don't have to be looking around all over the space and who's coming, who's trying to grab it and this, that, and the third, so I can build. You can't build when you're trying to defend yourself, right? So like the move that our sisters and brothers made recently in South Georgia and purchased all of that land, that's so powerful. is so powerful on many levels. First of all, the
And
fact that
tell people about that, Ras Kofi, because everybody doesn't know what happened.
okay, yeah, I don't know the name of the place, but I know it was 19 families, I believe, came together and purchased almost 1,000 acres, if I'm not
Yeah, I
mistaken.
didn't know how much. I know it was a lot of land. I didn't know what the acreage was.
We're talking about collective. We're talking about group economics right there. So that's liberation right there in itself. Even if it was just 1 acre, that's liberation. That's breaking cycles.
Yeah.
That's reversing the narrative that we were told that we can't live together and we can't work together.
And down in South Georgia, they've done that. I mean, they have been doing that for years, like on some levels. Because our dear friend Michael Moss, Mike is from those farms and
Right,
those collectives down in South
right,
Georgia.
right.
Yeah.
I remember one time I had the pleasure of interviewing Dick Gregory. I've
Mm.
interviewed him many times in my radio career. But I remember one time he talked about the fact that that we're going back to this narrative. He's like, stop repeating this whole crabs in the barrel narrative because
Mm.
we end up really feeling like that's our nature.
Right.
No, that's not the nature of the crab to be pulling down. If you go to where crabs live in their natural environment, they're not pulling each other down. It's the hot water.
That's right. It's the hot water. Yeah.
And
That's
they still ain't trying to pull each other down. They're just trying to get out the hot water.
right. Out of the pot.
So the whole point is,
Mm.
the whole formation of people working together is one thing. That's liberating in itself. I think of Baba Chokwe Lumumba, who was the first, I would say, independent mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. That's a whole nother conversation in itself. How people can take this collective sense of responsibility and independent thinking outside of the Democratic and Republican Party and make major moves in America. Like people don't think it can be done. And they had a protracted campaign where he was first made a councilman and this, but ended up being the mayor of Jackson, Mississippi. But they tell the story about why that term "free the land," for those who've heard that term, is used often. And they went and purchased some land. This was back in I don't know if it's the 60s or the 70s, but they had to go through all kind of struggles, even just to get on the land. But they celebrated the ownership of land and being on liberated space where they can be, as people who had different political views and everything, they could be free to be able to just live and develop their ideology, develop their families, stress free. I mean, that's one of the main things about it. So land is the basis of freedom. And if we even going beyond just the spiritual and the emotional seed of that, again, looking at the ability to feed ourselves. Right now, we talking about all kind of blockades. We're talking about all kind of food shortages that are being projected.
Yeah.
Some of that is fear mongering. But the reality is that most of the food is still coming from across the continent, across from California. I remember 3 or 4 years ago when there was this whole talk about California only having 1 year of water left. Remember that? And we were talking about like, well, 70% of the nation is going to be affected by that because that's where most of the food comes from.
Yeah.
So the fact that we have the ability to grow locally and cut out the carbon footprint as well as the middleman in terms of access to something that's so fundamental to us, that speaks volume. So growing our own food and doing whatever we can to secure our food source is absolutely an act of political resistance, and it's an act of self-love even before political resistance. It's an act of self-affirmation. It's definitely an act toward liberation. It's all of those things. We have to be able to control our food if we want to control our destiny.
Yes, and community development as well.
Oh man, don't even go there.
Yeah, definitely.
So that's even more sustainable then, right? Because it's not about just giving a man a fish and letting him, or letting him eat for a minute. It's just teaching us and getting ourselves in the practice again of governing ourselves. That's really what it is.
Okay, so once again, thank you. So first of all, thank you so much. Thanks for being with me. I love that that we are looking at you on the farm. So, and I know that you're on your way down to South Georgia to jump into some other farming. So I
Yeah.
want to go ahead and wrap up, but thank you so much for being with me today. And give one more time, tell people how can they reach you one more time.
We can reach us at shamba.atl, shamba.atl. Shamba is a Kiswahili word which means cultivating ground. And also my website is onthefarm.com, ondafarm.com. Phone number for more information for people who are not on the internet is 404-590-8010.
All right, Brother Ras Kofi.
Give thanks, Sister Leatrice. Good to be with you.
Good to be with you too. Bye.